I always prided myself on being a family man. We weren't perfect, of course, but Olivia and I had built a life that felt solid, unshakable. Our two kids, Rosie and Ethan, kept us busy in the best way possible. Rosie was 7, a first grader with an endless curiosity for life. She loved collecting little treasures, shells, flowers, shiny pebbles, and would always bring them to me with an innocent pride. Ethan, our 4-year-old, had just started preschool. He was full of energy, the kind of kid who turned any room into an adventure zone. Olivia had this way of holding everything together. She was sharp, ambitious, and endlessly charming. Someone who could juggle a boardroom meeting one moment and a bake sale the next. I worked from home as a freelance designer, which meant I got to pick up the kids from school most days and cook dinner while Olivia's career demanded longer hours. It had been a while since we'd taken a proper family vacation. Life always seemed to get in the way. Work deadlines, school schedules, bills piling up faster than we could clear them. But Olivia came home one evening with a spark in her eyes, the kind I hadn't seen in years. "We need to do this," she said, dropping a glossy brochure for a coastal resort onto the kitchen counter. Just us, the kids, and no distractions. I flipped through the pages. The place looked incredible. Sprawling beaches, a kids' club, luxury suites with ocean views. It was the kind of trip we'd always dreamed of, but never quite felt we could afford. I asked cautiously, glancing at her, if we could manage it. She waved off my concern with a casual gesture, reassuring me that she had been saving a little here and there. She said we deserved this, her confidence in the decision unwavering. The kids were thrilled when we told them. Rosie immediately started talking about seashells and sandcastles, while Ethan asked if the hotel had a pirate ship. The excitement was infectious, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were doing something purely for us. The weeks leading up to the trip were a blur of planning and packing. Olivia was unusually meticulous about every detail, making lists, double-checking itineraries, even buying new swimsuits for all of us. One night, as she meticulously fussed over a packing list, I couldn't help but tease her. I remarked on how much she was into this, a playful tone in my voice as I watched her double-check every detail. She smiled softly but kept her eyes on the list. She said it had been a long time since we'd done something like this and admitted she just wanted everything to be perfect. When the day finally came, we loaded the car at dawn, the kids still in their pajamas. The drive was long but filled with laughter. Rosie counted every red car we passed, while Ethan made up a game involving roadside billboards and pirate treasure. By the time we arrived at the resort, the sun was dipping low on the horizon, casting everything in warm, golden light. The place was breathtaking. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the ocean stretched out like an endless sheet of glass. The kids raced to the edge of the sand, their squeals of delight filling the air. Olivia stood beside me. She said quietly that this was exactly what we needed, her voice filled with a quiet sense of contentment. I slipped my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. I agreed, letting myself believe it, even if just for a moment. I told her this was going to be perfect, hoping my words would make it true. The first few days at the resort were exactly what I'd hoped for. Sunshine, laughter, and a break from the constant hum of responsibility. Rosie and Ethan took to the beach like fish to water. Rosie spent hours combing the shore for shells, carefully arranging them in intricate patterns by our lounge chairs, while Ethan dragged me into the waves, shouting about sea monsters and buried treasure. Olivia, for her part, seemed lighter. She laughed more, her smile unforced, as if some invisible weight had been lifted off her shoulders. I caught myself watching her often, her carefree posture as she lounged by the pool, the way her eyes sparkled when she played tag with the kids in the shallow waves. It felt like a glimpse of the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. Still, there were moments that didn't quite sit right. They were fleeting, almost insignificant on their own, like the way Olivia seemed overly preoccupied with our itinerary. One morning, while I wrestled Ethan into his swim trunks, she paced the room, glancing at her watch. She spoke with a tone that was a little too sharp, urging me to hurry if we wanted to catch the snorkeling boat. I tried to reassure her, reminding her that it was just the two of us. If we missed it, there would be another one this afternoon. She forced a smile and nodded, but something in her expression was strained, as though being late would unravel everything. Later that day, while the kids were busy building an ambitious sandcastle complete with a moat and driftwood flags, Olivia excused herself, saying she needed to check on something back at the room. I didn't think much of it at first. Everyone needs a breather, right? But when she didn't come back after 20 minutes, I started to wonder. Rosie looked up at me, her forehead scrunched with concern as she asked where Mommy was. I kept my tone light, reassuring her that Mommy probably just forgot her sunscreen. I added a casual remark about how particular she could be about that sort of thing, hoping to put Rosie at ease. But the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know why she had been so restless lately, or why she needed so much space during a trip that was supposed to be about togetherness. When Olivia returned, she looked refreshed, her cheeks faintly flushed. She brushed off the concern with a quick apology, saying she just needed to grab a few things, as if it were nothing out of the ordinary. I asked her casually if everything was okay, careful to keep my tone neutral so it wouldn't sound accusatory. She responded with a quick smile, assuring me that everything was fine. Her answer was perfectly reasonable. That evening, the resort hosted a beachside dinner. The tables were lit by tiki torches, and the smell of grilled seafood filled the warm night air. The kids were thrilled when a live band started playing, and Ethan dragged Olivia onto the makeshift dance floor. I sat back, watching as she twirled him around. Her laughter carried on the breeze. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that my doubts were nothing more than the overthinking of a man who had spent too much time indoors lately. But then, as Olivia spun Ethan into a fit of giggles, I saw her glance over her shoulder, just a quick, almost imperceptible look toward the edge of the crowd. I turned my head to follow her gaze. There was nothing unusual at first, just a group of resort guests sipping cocktails by the bar. But one man caught my attention. He wasn't looking at Olivia, not directly, but there was something about the way he held himself. Olivia's laughter rang out again, pulling my attention back to her. She was looking at Ethan now, her face full of love and joy, and for a moment, I felt foolish for even noticing. But later that night, after the kids had fallen asleep and the resort was quiet, I found myself replaying that moment in my mind. Who was that man? And why did it feel like he was somehow part of the puzzle I couldn't yet see? The next morning, I woke to the sound of seagulls and the smell of salt in the air. Olivia was already up, sitting on the balcony with a cup of coffee in hand. She looked peaceful, her face bathed in the golden morning light. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything was as it should be. "Morning," I said, stepping out onto the balcony. She looked up and returned the greeting with a small smile, mentioning that the kids were still fast asleep, and she decided to let me sleep in as well. I couldn't help but tease her as I sat down across from her, pointing out how unusual it was. Normally, she was the one pulling me out of bed for an early hike. She laughed lightly, but it felt distant. I figured we'd take it easy today. No plans, just relax. We spent the morning by the pool, the kids splashing and shouting as Olivia and I lounged nearby. She seemed present, but there were moments when her gaze would drift, her focus somewhere else entirely. I told myself not to pry, that we all need a little mental escape sometimes. It wasn't until lunch that things took a turn. We were sitting at an outdoor cafe, sharing a plate of calamari, when I noticed Olivia stiffen. Her eyes locked onto something, or someone, behind me. "What's wrong?" I asked, turning to look. She quickly shook her head, her smile forced as she assured me there was nothing wrong. She explained that she thought she had seen someone she knew but must have been mistaken. Her explanation didn't sit right with me. "Someone from work?" I pressed, trying to sound casual. She hesitated for just a moment too long before quickly brushing it off, telling me it was nothing, that I should forget it. But I couldn't forget it. Not when, a few minutes later, she excused herself to use the restroom, glancing over her shoulder as she walked away. I stayed with the kids, trying to shake the gnawing feeling in my gut. It wasn't until Rosie tugged on my arm, pointing to the beach, that I realized Olivia had been gone for over 15 minutes. Rosie asked where Mommy was, her voice carrying a hint of worry. I tried to reassure her, telling her that Mommy would be back soon. But deep down, I wasn't so sure myself. Something felt off, and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I left the kids with a friendly staff member at the kids' activity corner. Thankfully, the resort had plenty of those, and headed toward the restrooms. They were empty. I wandered back toward the cafe, scanning the area, and then I saw her. She was at the edge of the resort property, near the path leading to the private bungalows. She wasn't alone. The man from the night before, the tall, was standing close to her, too close. They weren't touching, but their body language spoke volumes. He leaned in slightly as if sharing something private, and she tilted her head, a small smile playing on her lips. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My mind raced to explain what I was seeing. Maybe he was an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in years. Maybe this was all completely innocent. But then she laughed, soft, low, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. I stepped back before either of them could see me and retreated to the cafe. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my drink, pretending nothing was wrong when the kids came bounding back to me. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Olivia returned to us not long after, acting as though nothing had happened. She was cheerful, attentive to the kids, and even more affectionate with me than she'd been in weeks. But every time she touched my hand or kissed my cheek, I felt the memory of that moment by the bungalows like a stone in my chest. That night, after the kids were asleep, I decided to ask her about it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't let it go. I noticed she seemed distracted, so I decided to bring it up, trying to keep my tone light. I mentioned that she had seemed off today. She glanced up from the book she was pretending to read and simply said, "Oh?" I carefully asked her about lunch and who she thought she saw. She hesitated for just a second, and that brief pause was enough to raise my suspicions. She quickly shrugged it off, saying it was a mistake. I wasn't satisfied with that answer. I pressed her, asking if she was sure. She told me she was sure. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and I could tell she was getting defensive. I wanted to tell her what I'd seen, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Fear that I was overreacting, fear of what her answer might be. So I shook my head and forced a smile. I told her it was no reason, lying through my teeth. But that night, as I lay awake listening to the sound of her steady breathing, I knew one thing for certain. There was more to this trip than I had realized, and I was going to find out what it was. The next day turned out to be amazing. We spent the whole morning swimming in the ocean, the warm sun making everything feel perfect. Afterward, we played a game of beach ball, just the four of us, laughing and running around in the sand like we were all kids again. It was one of those rare moments when everything seemed to align. The kids even said how much they enjoyed it and wished we could do it more often. Everything just felt so right. Dinner that evening was uneventful. Olivia was in high spirits, laughing with the kids and telling stories about some of her old college adventures, which always had the kids wide-eyed with fascination. For a fleeting moment, I let myself believe that maybe I had misread everything. Maybe the laughter I saw by the bungalows earlier had an innocent explanation. But as we finished dessert and I started ushering the kids toward the bathroom to brush their teeth, Olivia stood up and stretched, a bit too casually. She said she was going to head to the spa for a little while, her voice calm and measured. I looked at her, trying to read her expression, but she gave nothing away. I glanced at my watch and said it was late, wondering why she was heading to the spa now. "I know," she said, running her fingers through her hair, "but it's open until midnight. I could really use a massage after today. My shoulders are killing me." It sounded reasonable enough, but something about the way she avoided my eyes made my stomach churn. I masked my unease and told her I'd stay with the kids. She kissed me on the cheek and thanked me, telling me she'd see me later. She grabbed her bag and left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. After the kids were finally asleep, I sat on the couch, staring at the door. I told myself to trust her, to stop letting my mind spiral into worst-case scenarios. But the image of her by the bungalows wouldn't leave my head. I waited 20 minutes before I grabbed my wallet and room key. If she was at the spa, then fine. I'd feel ridiculous and paranoid, but at least I'd know. The spa was on the far side of the resort, tucked away behind a garden of blooming hibiscus. The low hum of soft music played from hidden speakers, and the scent of lavender wafted through the air. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile and asked how she could help me. My wife said she'd be here tonight. Olivia Carter. I tried to sound casual, though my voice felt tight. The receptionist frowned slightly as she flipped through her reservation book. She apologized and said they didn't have anyone by that name scheduled for the night, asking if I was sure she had booked an appointment. I froze. Maybe she decided to walk in, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded. The receptionist offered to check and disappeared down the hallway. A few minutes later, she returned, shaking her head. She apologized again, telling me that she wasn't there. I managed to nod, muttering a quick thanks before leaving. My heart was pounding as I stepped into the cool night air. Where the hell was she? I wandered the resort, my mind racing with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Maybe she'd gone for a walk, or maybe she was sitting by the pool, lost in thought. But deep down, I knew where I had to go. The bungalows. The path to the private bungalows was dimly lit, the glow of lanterns casting long shadows across the sand. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd find her sitting by the beach or maybe chatting with another guest. But as I approached the bungalow area, I heard voices, muffled but unmistakably hers. My steps faltered, my breath catching in my throat. I followed the sound, my heart thundering in my chest, until I reached one of the bungalows. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I saw them. Olivia was nearby, her hair loose and falling over her shoulders. She wasn't alone. The man from the beach, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence, was standing close to her, his hands on her waist. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. They were completely lost in each other, the kind of intimacy I hadn't seen from her in months. Her laugh, soft, breathy, and filled with something I didn't recognize anymore, cut through me like a blade. Then, as if the ground had crumbled beneath me, they kissed, and it deepened quickly into something I couldn't bear to describe, their connection raw and unmistakable. I felt like an intruder in my own life, watching a version of her I didn't recognize. I stumbled back, my hand gripping the wall for support. The world tilted, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest burned with a mix of fury, devastation, and disbelief. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, to confront them both. But I knew I couldn't. Not here, not now. Instead, I turned and walked away, my legs unsteady beneath me. The night air felt suffocating as I made my way back to our suite, the image of them seared into my mind. When I finally reached the room, I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. The question swirled in my head, relentless and unyielding. How long had this been going on? Why had she lied to me? And most importantly, what the hell was I supposed to do now? I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall, my mind an inferno of anger and heartbreak. My hands were clenched into fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. Every second that passed felt like a betrayal, every breath a reminder of what I had just seen. The suite door creaked open. Olivia walked in, her face flushed as if she had been rushing. She didn't notice me at first. She tossed her bag onto the chair and stretched, letting out a sigh that might have sounded casual if I didn't already know what she'd been up to. When she finally saw me, she greeted me with a breezy tone, as if she'd just returned from a relaxing evening. She told me the spa was amazing and suggested I should go tomorrow. Don't, I interrupted, my voice low but trembling with barely restrained fury. Don't you dare. She froze, narrowing her eyes slightly. She asked what was wrong with me. Where were you, Olivia? I asked, standing up slowly. My voice was calm, almost too calm, but it carried the weight of everything I'd seen. She hesitated, her expression faltering for a split second before she plastered on an incredulous smile. She told me she was at the spa and asked what was with the interrogation. Don't lie to me, I snapped, the volume of my voice rising now. I went to the spa. You weren't there. Her eyes widened, and I could see the flicker of panic she was trying so hard to hide. She quickly said that maybe they hadn't seen her, explaining that she hadn't booked anything and had just walked in. She added that she didn't think it was a big deal. They checked, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. You weren't there. So, I'll ask again. Where were you? She crossed her arms defensively, and her tone shifted into something colder, more combative. She asked why I was acting like a damn detective and added that she had gone for a walk afterward. Then she snapped, asking if that was a crime now. A walk? I repeated, laughing bitterly. That's the best you can come up with? A walk? Should I tell you where you really were? Or do you want to try lying to my face again? Her eyes flashed with anger as she took a step closer, pointing a finger at me. She told me I was acting insane, paranoid, and overbearing, and that it was honestly exhausting. She added, with a sharp edge to her voice, that no wonder she needed to get out tonight. I'd been smothering her. I flinched at her words, but I didn't let them distract me. I saw you, Olivia, by the bungalows. With him. The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly, her voice dripping with venom. She snapped at me, asking if I was stalking her now, spying on her. Then she demanded to know what the hell was wrong with me. What's wrong with me? I yelled, finally losing the last shred of control I had. I'm not the one sneaking off to cheat on my husband. Don't you dare turn this around on me. She scoffed and shook her head, as if I were being completely absurd. She told me I was delusional and that it wasn't cheating, just a friend. She said we were only talking, and then, with an exasperated tone, she added that I was blowing everything out of proportion. A friend? I barked, my voice thick with disbelief. You were practically wrapped around him. Talking? That's what we're calling it now. She rolled her eyes, clearly treating my anger like it was an inconvenience. She told me I didn't get it, that I never had. She went on, saying that he listened to her, that he actually cared about what she had to say, unlike me. She added that I was so busy trying to be the perfect husband that I didn't even notice what she needed. Her words hit me like a slap, but they only fueled my rage. So, this is my fault now? You screw around behind my back, and somehow it's because I didn't notice you enough? Don't try to justify what you've done, Olivia. Own it. She crossed her arms again, glaring at me as if I were the villain in this entire story. She spoke sharply, her voice full of resentment. She said how I didn't understand what it was like to feel invisible, like just someone's wife and nothing more. She claimed that he made her feel seen again, as if that was supposed to excuse everything. Seen? I repeated, my voice breaking. I've loved you for 12 years, Olivia. I built a life with you, a family, a future. And you throw it all away for some guy who makes you feel seen? For a moment, she didn't respond. Her defiance faltered, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd finally admit the truth. But then she straightened her shoulders and looked me in the eye. She looked at me, her voice cold and biting, telling me that I wasn't perfect. She said I thought I was, but I wasn't. Her words were sharp, and I could feel the weight of them. But what really hurt was when she added that if I stopped being so self-righteous for even a second, maybe I'd understand why she needed something more. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, and felt something inside me break. I gave you everything, I said quietly, my voice trembling. And this is how you repay me? She didn't answer, just stood there with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to be. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. My body ached from the restless night, but my mind felt sharper, clearer. I had spent the night replaying everything. Our life together, the lies, her justifications. By the time the sun rose, I knew what I had to do. Olivia walked into the living room, still wearing the defiant mask from the night before. She didn't apologize. She didn't even seem ashamed. Instead, she poured herself a coffee and looked at me like I was the one in the wrong. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady. About what? She replied, her tone dripping with indifference. About this marriage. About what happens next, I said, standing up. Because I'm done, Olivia. I'm done pretending this can be fixed. I'm filing for divorce. She froze, her cup halfway to her lips. For the first time, her composure cracked, and I could see the shock in her eyes. She said that we had been together for 12 years, that we had kids, and asked if I was really just going to throw it all away. I said it firmly, feeling the weight of every word. I told her that I wasn't the one who threw it all away. She had done that. The moment she decided I wasn't enough for her, The moment she went behind my back. This wasn't something we could come back from. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. Her face twisted in anger, and I could see the frustration boiling over. She snapped, asking if I thought I was the victim now. She wanted to know if I had any idea how lonely she'd felt, how much she had sacrificed for our family. Then, with a sharp edge to her voice, she told me that I wasn't a saint. I wasn't blameless in this mess. She said I was just as responsible for it as she was. I've made mistakes, I admitted. But I didn't betray you. I didn't betray us. And no amount of blaming me is going to change what you did. For a moment, I saw her expression falter, like she might break down. But then, just as quickly, her anger took over again. She snapped, telling me to go ahead and file for divorce, but warning me not to think for a second that I'd be taking the kids. She made it clear that I couldn't just walk away from everything and act like I was the hero in this story. Her words hit me like a punch, but I didn't back down. I said I wouldn't leave my children. I'll fight for them if I have to, but I'm done fighting for you. As I packed my things, I heard her muttering under her breath, slamming cabinets and trying to provoke me, but I didn't react. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Then, as I was about to leave, she said something that stopped me in my tracks. She glared at me, her voice dripping with venom as she warned me, saying I would regret this. She told me that I might think I was doing the right thing, but that I'd end up regretting it. As I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, I turned to look at her. The words came out, steady but full of finality. I told her that the only thing I regretted was not seeing the real her sooner. The divorce process has been rough, messy, drawn out, and emotionally draining. But I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The kids live with me most of the time. Olivia gets them on weekends, but it's clear the kids are struggling with the new arrangement. I've made it my mission to give them as much stability as I can. Mornings are filled with pancakes and cartoons, afternoons with soccer games and dance practice. I never realized how much I'd relied on Olivia to handle these things, but I'm learning. As for me, I'm doing okay. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when the pain of betrayal hits me like a freight train. But there are also moments of peace, of hope. I've started going to therapy, trying to untangle the knots this experience has tied in my head. I've reconnected with old friends, people I lost touch with during the whirlwind of marriage and parenthood. And then there's the unexpected. I've started writing again. It's something I gave up years ago, but now it feels like a lifeline, a way to process everything I've been through. Olivia and I barely speak. When we do, it's usually about the kids. She's still with the guy from the bungalow, or so I've heard. Part of me wonders if she's happy, but I've learned not to dwell on that. Her choices are no longer my concern. What matters now is the life I'm building with Ethan and Rosie, a life rooted in honesty, love, and resilience. If there's one thing this ordeal has taught me, it's that I deserve better. And so do they.